All right. Welcome back, everyone. We hope you had a dynamic and valuable discussion with your group and were able to broaden each other's perspectives and share relevant resources. I know our group had a really, really good discussion, and I'm so glad that I was there to hear it. So we'd now like to ask each moderator to briefly share one major takeaway. Elizabeth, do you want to call on the moderators?
Sure, I will go since I'm Breakout Room 1's moderator. I'll go first. Yep. So there were so many good ideas. I wish I had another 10 minutes to share everything that was discussed. I think one of the biggest themes was around the lack of options, much of what Erica had spoken to before. And we had people with lived experience in our session, similar to the mom who we heard from first, Gabby, today. And so just speaking to the fact of the relationship between the provider and often how that power dynamic gets stolen away from the birthing family, the birthing person. And I'll stop there, but I could keep going. So thank you. In our breakout room 2, who was our breakout room? Ryan, is that you? Or is it? Okay, Amy was.
It's me, yeah. So my name is Amy Rivera, and I had a very lovely group. I think some of the themes that could be pulled out were that the women in my group were all working very hard to support women and to connect with them during this time, but acknowledging that this conversation brought up some more need to dive more directly into the impacts of COVID, and especially one of them is IBCLC, and having those conversations about how did that impact you and your breastfeeding at the hospital. And so some more work around that, and just acknowledgement around the multiple traumas that have come with COVID, and needing to continue staying connected. We talked a lot about isolation and how that impacted some people personally in their breastfeeding journey. And then some cool successes too around some women who had longer, I'm taking too long, but longer breastfeeding relationships. Some who reinitiated breastfeeding because of COVID, and then needs for breaks for moms, connection, respite. I'm done.
Well, I look frozen. Okay, I'm happy to follow. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan, and I was the moderator for the 3rd breakout room. And, building on what Amy said around isolation, I think one of the things that came up in our conversation was separation and uncertainty, and how those things were impacted by the pandemic, and how that shaped feeding, perhaps shorter hospital stays with less time available to give people guidance before they go home, and then feeling uncertain when you go home, perhaps not being aware of any in-person options for support once you're out of the facility. And even how those folks that had access to telehealth, that's better than nothing, but it doesn't allow for touch or, guidance in that way, support in that way that we get when we're in person. So, and then the other thing that we heard was that Phoenix Indian Medical Center shut down and didn't tell anybody. And so, moms, families, birthing people, supporters in Arizona and other states that rely on that facility, were sort of left in the dark. And so that created a lot of anxiety and trouble for folks as well. So, yeah, I'm over too. Sorry.
Okay. I'm Eileen. I was the 4th room moderator, and one of the things that came up was just the parallel story of the advocacy and the need to speak up, and how hard and difficult and challenging that may be. And also on the positive side, we had a conversation sharing a story about a team approach to a home birth. And it keeps coming up in these conversations that the home birth rate has risen, and I wish there was data for it. And then we talked about the breastfeeding journey, and how we still need to educate people about that. That's something that's really important to us. And I'm done.
Oh, yes, and I will actually echo some of those things were very much what we talked about, groups of support, moms really being resourceful, kind of creating their own pods of support, home birth. Yes.
Hi, I was in group 6, a wonderful group of ladies. We had a wonderful conversation and echo. We talked about a lot of the same things that you all discussed, but we did touch on, we talked about NICU, the babies in the NICU, and that they only could have maybe one parent at a time visiting. They had other stressors because if mom or dad got COVID, then they were separated from the baby longer. And then I know in our group, we talked about how Kim, one of our presenters, talked about PTSD, and all of us, or I think most of us in our group, were like, wow, we didn't even think about that, you know, as a problem for this. Let's see, we also talked about lack of needed support because of COVID. And there was a lot of many missed appointments during the 4 to 6 months. You weren't going into your pediatricians, so then they weren't getting that good information. And we talked about milk supply diminishing because a lot of the moms were getting information about sleep training for their baby, so then their milk supply was reduced during, you know, sleeping for 12 hours. And then lack of peer support. We were, our group was hearing about lack of information, not getting that peer support. So they were hearing from maybe one resource what to do, but they weren't hearing from other people and their experiences. So that peer support was really important. And so education was really important, more feeding therapy, but then also less information. So we didn't want to overload the parents and the moms.
Thank you so much to all of our moderators and our note takers for getting down all this information. I think that this one has been so powerful and so interesting to me to hear all these different perspectives. And I'm so glad that we all had such productive discussions. Thank you all again for attending the second session of our 4th trimester lunchtime. Sorry, that's not the second. This is the 4th session of our 4th trimester lunchtime conversation series. And of course, a big thank you to each of our speakers. As we draw to a close, yeah, that's the right one. Thanks, Elizabeth. Please take our survey about this particular session. And also, there are places here that if you want to, you can do a screenshot and use the QR codes. Also join us for our next lunchtime conversation, which will be around the impact of COVID-19 on childcare, which I think is going to be really great. And again, that's the first Friday. And sign up for the statewide ecosystem summit. We can't wait to have you there so we can have a full day to discuss this type of thing and more. If you want to bookmark the survey or the ecosystem summit using your QR code, please do it. All right. So I think that we are about coming to an end. And you remember that your participation and input make our 4th trimester ecosystem so much stronger. I'm so delighted that we had so many participants today. You know, this is World Breastfeeding Week, so it's even more powerful. Keep it in the coming week, keep an eye out for an email from me. I'll have a full summary of today's breakout session discussions, a copy of the slides, and a link for the recording. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you at our next lunchtime conversation.